sort of thinking that I like to use, and it usually catches people off guard, is to say, okay, you're right, that is a good point, and by the same token, I went to the mall the other day and I saw you can get a copy of the Holy Bible for $5, and a Nintendo GameCube costs like $300 or something like that. So where are our nation's priorities that God's word here is only worth $5, whereas this little entertainment is so much more, 60 times that. So this nation's priorities are disgusting, and shouldn't the price of the Bible be much higher? And if you said that, that would be absurd, and people, even leftists wouldn't talk like that. Well, they don't like the Bible anyway, but you get the point. You could pick something leftist-like that is cheap, like the copy of Communist Manifesto, perhaps. All right, or the New York Times, right? The New York Times should be $50 a copy, and it's not. And so where are our nation's priorities? What are we saying about the quality of the media if, newspapers are so cheap? Right? If you talk like that, that would just be patently absurd. That would be silly, and nobody would buy into that, right? But that's exactly what's going on when it comes to labor, right? The same principles are involved, that just because a particular unit of labor gets a low price in the marketplace doesn't mean, therefore, society thinks that commodity has a low ethical value or isn't important to our civilization. Okay? And again, if you get lost and then just think through again to the Bible, that it actually would be bad if a Bible cost $500, because then you wouldn't be able to hand them out to people, right? It would be really expensive. There'd be fewer Bibles going around. By the same token, if what you want is to give high school mathematics lectures to as many people as possible, you want math teachers to get a low salary, because if they earned as much as professional athletes did, their local school boards wouldn't be able to afford as many. Right? Only the cream of the crop students could go and learn about trigonometry. All right? So if you think it through and just push it a little bit, you'd realize it would be terrible if mathematics teachers earned what professional athletes did. And again, the reason for that has to do with scarcity. It's what economists often talk about as the so-called water-diamond paradox, where this is something classical economists talked about, that, of course, water is essential for life. It's very important, and yet diamonds are a frippery. That you can use them to make drill bits and things like that in certain applications, but really diamonds are just pretty to look at. They're not essential for life, and yet water is very cheap, however we only want to define a unit of water, whereas diamonds are very expensive. And so why is that? There seems to be a disconnect, and the answer just has to do with scarcity, with supply and demand, if you want to think in those terms, that relative to human beings' uses for it, there's a lot more water than we need. Whereas with diamonds, it's the opposite, that for the things we want to do, for the rings we want to put it in, or their necklaces or what have you, earrings, putting it in certain cutting instruments, there aren't that many diamonds to go around, or it's very difficult to get them in the form that we need. And so that's why in a marketplace, those are the prices. It's not a reflection of how important are they to our civilization. And so it's the same thing when it comes to price of labor. Now, of course, it strikes certain people closer to home that the price of a Bible, per se, isn't directly related to someone's income. The person selling the Bible could just sell more. And so if a Bible drops in price, that doesn't necessarily mean someone has less money to take home to his family. Whereas, yes, if you're a certain worker and the price of your labor goes down, then obviously that's going to influence you more. So I don't mean to deny that there is some difference between these types of cases I'm talking about, but the difference is not coming in because society doesn't care about teachers, right? As the Bible example demonstrates. So let me just deal with one other topic, and then I'll open it up for questions, and that has to do with the minimum wage, and it's again related to salaries. And so here the argument is, in a free market, if it weren't for this wise institution, the government protecting us with the minimum wage, then obviously all these poor people would just be getting pennies an hour. I mean, just look at what wages were before the minimum wage was instituted, and now they're much higher. And there are all these people earning the minimum wage, and obviously it's still not enough. We should raise it, and that's the argument. But at least we've got that bare minimum, because otherwise these greedy employers would just push it way down. They'd collude with each other and keep prices or the wages down to basically a subsistence level, because those people have no bargaining power. They'd all be starving to death were it not for the minimum wage. So there's a bunch of different responses you can make to that. And the one, my personal favorite is, well, if that's true, if that's your worldview, and now we do have this minimum wage, how come everybody doesn't earn the minimum wage, right? If that's their mentality, that these employees would be just helpless in the face of all of these powerful employers, because you have to work. You really can't be too choosy if you got a family to feed. How come everybody isn't earning the minimum wage, when in fact it's really a very low percentage of the population? How come brain surgeons aren't all earning the minimum wage because the greedy hospitals collude with each other and say, let's just pay these guys $2 an hour, or whatever the minimum wage is, let's pay them $5.50 an hour, $5.75 an hour, and it's just keep their wages down because they have to eat. So what are we going to do? And what are they going to do? They can't just quit. And if you think about that, that's obviously silly. That no, the reason the vast majority of people in the United States earn far more than the minimum wage is because of competition. That if hospitals really did collude and hold down the price of brain surgeons in one region, well, hospitals in the city right next to them would pay them a little bit more to entice them to come over there and say, we'll give you $30 an hour. Because obviously they can charge their customers, the patients, a lot more for the services that the brain surgeons are supplying, right? And so that process would just happen until workers generally receive what economists call their marginal revenue product, right? So if you think about it, you've got a worker. If you as a firm know, if I hire this person, he's going to bring in certain revenues. Let's say he brings in $50,000 a year more in sales because I hired this person than if I didn't. That means the employer knows I could pay up to $50,000 a year, taking consideration of taxes and things like that, and then I would still be making money. I'm not going to pay $60,000 a year for someone who only adds $50,000 to my bottom line, because then I'd be losing $10,000 on the worker. But as long as what I'm paying out is less than what the person's bringing in to my bottom line, then I make money. And so of course, employers would love to pay less than that, to pay much less than that, and to get a bigger gain from the worker, but they can't stop their competitors from offering a little bit more and trying to entice them away, right? So if you're earning $30,000 a year on this worker because you're underpaying him by that much, what's to stop your competitor from offering him $10,000 more? Because your competitor then would still be earning $20,000 on that guy, but then you would just try to bid him back, and so you see how it works. So it's not perfect, of course, and there's all sorts of complications that it's not obvious when you look at a particular worker, how much are you going to add to my bottom line this year? For all you know, the person's going to be showing up to the job drunk and stealing from you. But the point is, over time, in general, workers tend to get paid their marginal revenue product. So now when it comes to very low-skilled workers, people that really only contribute, let's say, $2 an hour to the company, and the government comes along and says, no, it is illegal for you to pay those workers that wage. If you want to hire this person, you have to pay him whatever it is, what is the minimum wage? You guys know? Okay. That's a good answer. Depends on the state. I was thinking the federal one. Okay, so you guys are all obviously well-educated college students. You don't even know what the minimum wage is, and neither do I. But whatever the wage, it's 5 something at the federal level. Now, if the person can only add $2 or $3 to the firm's bottom line, and the government says it is illegal for you to pay that, you have to pay $5.65, whatever it is, obviously, is the firm going to hire that person and just eat the loss? They're going to say, oh, well, we got to hire this person because of this dumb law. I'm losing $2 and change per hour on this worker. No, they're just going to refrain from hiring that person in the first place. And so that's why, in particular areas of the country where there are a lot of unskilled workers, and you can speculate as to why that is. I think it's because of enforcement of certain drug laws, and the public schools are terrible in those areas, and the effects of welfare and leading to single-parent families, things like that. But for whatever reason, in certain areas, certain neighborhoods, there are a lot of people who are not able to earn or not able to contribute to a company what the minimum wage says that they need to be paid. And so again, those people just don't get hired. They never get their foot in the door, and they never learn the skills, how to show up on time, how to handle the cash register, how to deal with customers, things like that. They don't learn those basic skills, and so once you're unemployed for a long time, you become unemployable. All right, so far from helping the underclass is what they think they're doing, or the low-skilled people, the minimum wage law precisely hurts those people. It doesn't affect the brain surgeon because they weren't going to be paid anywhere near the minimum wage in the first place. All right, so this and all sorts of other myths I deal with in my book to show that actually a free market helps people. It is not unfair and cruel, and the government programs designed to offset the alleged monstrous effects of a free market actually end up hurting the very people it's supposed to help. And I'll open up for questions.